Only one, only one that you love, love. Only one, only one that you love, love. Only one.
Okay. Yes. Hello, everybody. It's very loud. Can everybody see us and hear us? Yeah, so good afternoon. I'm very happy to be speaking today with such an illustrious panel about the importance and also the challenges of taking care of such an important photographic heritage as are the archives and the work of George Hoyningen-Huene, Helmut Newton, and Heinz Hajek Halke. Three photographers, major photographers of the 20th century. And I would like to start the discussion, the conversation, with an introduction of our panelists. Ladies first. Susanna Brown is the specialist for fashion photography. Susanna is a photo historian, an academic, a curator, lecturer, and writer on photography based in London. She has a very long museum career behind her, over 10 years, 14 years at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and the National Portrait Gallery in London. And she has curated seminal museum exhibitions on Cecil Beaton, Horst P. Horst, Tim Walker lately, and about the history of fashion photography. So she is the person to speak about fashion photography. And she is here in her role as an advisor, cultural advisor, curator to the George Hoyningen-Huene archive. Second, Tommy Rönngren, based in Stockholm, entrepreneur and photo enthusiast, also a collector of photography and design and art, I think, and the owner of the George Hoyningen-Huene estate. Tommy is also a partner at Fotografiska, you know, the major institution, cultural institution for photography with branches in Tallinn, Stockholm, New York, and soon in Berlin. And and third, Dr. Matthias Harder. Matthias is a very good friend for a very long time, and he is an art historian, a curator, a writer. You have many photo hats on, actually, a teacher in photography, and he, since 2004, he has been the head curator at the Helmut Newton Foundation here in Berlin, and since 2019, you are the foundation's director, right? And Matthias has curated numerous exhibitions in the museum, in the Helmut Newton Foundation, but also worldwide on contemporary photography. And Matthias is also a specialist of the work of Herbert List, who was a good friend to George Hoyningen-Huene. That is an interesting aspect. Myself, I am an art advisor and an appraiser specialized in photography based in Cologne. I am here as the representative of the Heinz Hajek Halke estate. And my role is to advise the estate on cultural and also in commercial issues. The Heinz Hajek Halke estate is administered by Chaussee 36, which is a non-profit association based in Berlin. Yes, so I would like to start this off by asking Matthias first to give us a little introduction into your work at the Helmut Newton Foundation and about the structure of the foundation. I don't know if you need to give us an introduction in the work of Helmut Newton, which is quite known, but yes.
Okay.
Please.
Thanks, Simone. Yes, you already mentioned it. I'm there for 17 years now. Since 2004. Before that, I did several other things, including the show with Herbert List in Munich, which was traveling around. And I just showed you, Tommy, a photograph which has a great combination or great relationship with Hoyningen-Huene. They traveled together to Paris, of course, and later on as well to Hellas, to Greece, and they did literally pictures side by side. So there's as well an estate in Hamburg of Herbert List, a friend of us runs, and so but there are so many estates just brought out to the world just from private houses. But in our case, we are a bit bigger.
Yes.
Thank you. So we are here from 2004 in Berlin, and most of you have been there already. I mean, you're welcomed by the big nudes. This is a military casino. Helmut Newton came by, and this building was given to him as he was leaving the city 65 years before, and and then he created his own foundation within this former military casinos and in this casino. And the funny thing here is that you, as a building was erected in 1909, you found here 5 Prussian officials. And now you have this change of paradigm that you have the big nudes, Helmut Newton's big nudes there since the very beginning as we opened the house. So everything was transformed with this kind of Prussian austerity and modern elegance. And since then we are creating completely different exhibitions there. For example, we show the early fashion photography in the 60s. This was a show called Fired. Helmut Newton was fired by French Vogue in the 60s as he did this series for Queen magazine. Queen magazine is a very innovative magazine, as you might know, Susanna. And he was covering the Kuratorische fashion, and this was really a fantastic scoop actually for that magazine, because they left everything out of the other Paris fashion houses just to show these Kuratorische fashion, which was very innovative by then. So Newton was hired by the Kleins, like the magazines, and sometimes as well the fashion designers themselves. And you see here in the second picture how our place is changing from exhibition to exhibition. The former one was the year 2007. This was the year 2009. You see here into the rooms, and we were presenting by then Sumo, which was these enormous book Taschen Publishing brought onto the market in 1999. 10 years after we did this show, so we transferred all the pictures he did in this book. There was no exhibition by then. So we did the exhibition. We transferred everything out from the book, which he did before, into an exhibition. And normally you flip to the pages of a book and you just see the spread. You just see 2 pictures on one side. In this exhibition, you were able to look at everything at the same moment, literally, and this was a completely different approach. And everybody, I mean, most of the people, I guess, were very happy to see this kind of new presentation within an exhibition room. 3 rows, as you can see, and if there is something left out here, for example, then you would have a blank page on the other side. Actually, it's just the double pages following up, and you're going into the exhibition, you're going into the book, literally. Next thing, we are inviting other photographers like Mario Testino in this case. This was in 2017. If you look through the door, you see the big nudes again, one of the big nudes, and then you see this kind of juxtaposition with the other fashion model just put directly onto the wall with a wallpaper. So in this case, we were walking into an exhibition space, and it was like walking into a book, the whole thing was like a pop-up book. And yeah, for the visitors, it was very astonishing. And this aspect is as well a kind of a leitmotif for us, because as Helmut left the house to go to a shooting, guess what June said? She said, "Astonish me." And this was this kind of the motto, actually. I mean, he came back always with a very astonishing pictures, and we are following this kind of tradition. Actually, of course, the whole thing with our estate is about the presentation, preservation, examination of the photographic work of Helmut and June Newton. She was also known as Alice Springs, as you all know. I mean, most of you have been there in the place. You saw probably the change, the transformation, the metamorphose of the space, and this is how we go on. I'm planning now a huge show on Newton on the 101st birthday, because we had to postpone the big retrospective. We're preparing a new huge book, not as big as the Sumo, but enormous book, in an incredible print run with Taschen again, and so this is always great to distribute the idea of Helmut, because we're showing it here in this place. Newton choose, and then we bring everything out. The pictures in the form of the medium of a book, plus real exhibitions we were creating beforehand and showing in our place, and go on with this, you know. But we invite as well other photographers from time to time, as it was Helmut's wish. So this is the way how we work, and later on we go into the discussion with digitalization, responsibility, and so on. This was just a tiny little statement from my side at the beginning. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Matthias, maybe you can hand it over to Susanna. Yes, it's a great privilege to have such a fantastic space as you have, and to be able to show this work in all its aspects, and also invite or curate other positions and compare. And this is just a fantastic situation for you. And yes, I suppose that you all have been at the Helmut Newton Foundation already. If you haven't, it's very, very highly recommended to go there. At the moment, you have several exhibitions. Can you just quickly?
Yeah, at the moment we are showing four artists, four photographers. The show is called American 1970s, 80s. There's John Meyerowitz on the first three rooms, streetwise, and there's Helmut Newton in the center. We always have Helmut in the center. You know, this is the core. We go out from him. You know, he's actually the starting point for this kind of tiny or bigger group shows. Then we have Sheila Metzner, a very close friend of Helmut and June, and for the first time ever shown in Berlin and in Germany. And then we have Evelyn Hofer. And then additionally in the ground floor we have a project room, and this is dedicated now to Stefan Erfurt, because he was the assistant of Evelyn Hofer, and he was, let's say, one time he was just calling Joe Meyerowitz, and he got a lot of input from Joe Meyerowitz, that he was transferring his photography and his language into this kind of twilight photography. And it's, you know, therefore there's so many bridges, you know, between the photographers upstairs and downstairs and so on. And the next show will be the retrospective, and then we do a Hollywood show and so on and so on.
Okay, big program. Yeah. Thank you, Matthias. Susanna, so we are now changing not the subject completely, but we have a very special photographic position with George Hoyningen-Huene, who actually has his first show, his first exhibition in Germany, right?
That's right.
Which Susanna curated at Griesebach, the auction house in Fasanenstraße. And it's a fantastic, elegant exhibition, highly recommended for everybody to go and see. You will find images which you probably know, because a few of George Hoyningen-Huene's images are iconic, as we say, and you have seen them, everybody has seen them before. And there are so many discoveries to be made, because the work as it's in its entity is very, very little known apart from a few people. And I would like to ask you, Susanna, to talk us a bit about his personality, his work, and your selection maybe for the exhibition.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head just then. A lot of you will know many of the pictures that George Hoyningen-Huene, or George, as we call him as friends, you will know the pictures, but you won't know the name. And what we're really trying to do, aren't we, Tommy, with the estate, is kind of bring his name back to the fore. He has really been forgotten over the years. He passed away at quite a young age in 1968. And I think perhaps because he didn't have family members to keep his name alive, and 1968 was before photography, and particularly fashion photography, was being collected in a serious way, Huene has to some extent been forgotten. But he is one of the most important photographers of the early 20th century. You know, he's up there with Edward Steichen and Cecil Beaton and his protégé, Horst, as one of the great stars of the beginnings of magazine photography. So his career began in the middle of the 1920s in Paris, and he was appointed as chief photographer to French Vogue magazine. And Vogue at that time had the French and the British and the American editions of the magazine. And his work, as some of the images you see here are from Vogue, was often published in all three of the magazines. So it's a very international life that he lived, and he traveled quite frequently around to Europe and to America. And 10 years later, he actually moved from Paris to the States and moved over to Harper's Bazaar magazine. So he had this extraordinary career that straddles the continents, and also straddles two of, well, the only two leading fashion magazines of that part of the 20th century, Vogue and Harper's Bazaar. And Vanity Fair, which is the kind of Hollywood magazine that is the sister publication to Vogue, also featured many of his portraits of actors and Hollywood directors and so forth. But interestingly for us, and I think with our work, this is something that we're only just starting to uncover in the archive, because it's still a very new archive for you, Tom. It's only a couple of years, right, that you've had the archive, that we're realizing also there's a huge amount of wonderful color work, because interestingly, as a photographer, he begins his work in the middle of the 20s when everything is still black and white, but he's still working in the end of the 1930s, kind of 1938, 1939, when Kodachrome film, the color film for professional use, that's kind of beautiful large format Kodachrome film, comes into circulation. And as you can see with some of these covers from Vogue and from Harper's, he's very quick to embrace this new language of photography. You know, color was an absolute revelation. And there's a sort of second chapter, really, to Huene's career, when he sort of put his camera down and moved on from photography and actually started working as a color advisor on Hollywood movies. So in the 1950s, in the early years of color film, he began working with some of the biggest and most important directors like George Cukor in Hollywood, advising on the palette and the aesthetic and the color combinations to create atmosphere within movies. And as you see here, just a few little moments from the archive, it's not just the photographs, it's also wonderful historic magazines, letters from Huene and to Huene, from his friends all over the world, you know, talking about his career and his photography, but also the film industry. You probably can't read it on here, but one of these letters is about his experience working with Marilyn Monroe and what a complete pain in the something, you know, she's a nightmare. And it's a very funny letter that he writes to Horst saying, you know, she's awful, we hate it. And they're hilarious, some of these letters. And they give us, as we sort of work through the material, such an insight into his personality, because of course, you know, we never met him, we didn't know him. And through reading these types of documents, we're gradually feeling like we're understanding him as a man, which is very different to your experience with Helmut, who is of such a much more recent generation. We are constantly trying to understand, you know, as an artist, as a photographer, what would he want us to do, right? You know, we're always talking about, if he was still here, how would he feel about the exhibition at Griesebach? What would he want us to speak about and to celebrate? And that sort of private worlds, like the letters and these intimate documents, are so important for our work. And beautiful drawings as well. He also made fashion illustrations in the early years at Vogue, and that's one of his exquisite drawings. That's from 1926. And, you know, for us, I guess we have these sort of three, what would we call them, kind of strands of our work, these three different layers, really, isn't it? That we're always thinking about the sort of public world and the academic world and the commercial world. And so what we're always trying to do with the new projects and the beautiful new website is to think, well, what are we doing for the public? So this is our new exhibition, which I hope you'll all come and see at the beautiful gallery at Griesebach. You know, this is very much for everyone, and we want this to be accessible to a really wide audience. But of course, our website is a very important part of that public world. But then the academic world, which is perhaps a smaller number of people who exist within the university community and the colleges, and we have a great PhD student starting next year at Princeton in America. So that for us is a really important academic collaboration. And then the commercial, which is as important as those other things, which is, you know, part of keeping an artist's name alive and part of maintaining their legacy is ensuring that works are available for collectors and museums and so forth. So they're kind of the three layers, if you like, of our work. But they're all, of course, very connected and sort of interwoven, if that makes sense.
Thank you. That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Tommy, you discovered somehow the estate of Hoyningen-Huene. You have bought it, you are the owner, and you are the person now to bring it to life, to promote it on the academic level and also on the commercial level. So how did you find the archive? It's fantastic. It's like a dream story.
We have a friend called Gert Elfring, who happens to own the estate of Horst P. Horst.
Yes.
So he introduced us to the previous owner, who was Ricky Horst, the adopted son of Horst. And he thought that we could probably do something good with it and getting back to life again. And we are finding out more and more interesting sides of him. I mean, he was a little bit like Forrest Gump. He was a pioneer, he had the elegance, and lately we have seen the relevance. So, you know, he was in his peak time in the 20s and the 30s. The world was a little bit in the same situation as now, after a recession, and everybody wants to get back to normal and so on. So he was, we recently find out that he had a friend called Joe Pilates. He was one of the first who did Pilates exercises in the 30s in New York. And we have an amazing set of pictures from that. And he was empowering women. Obviously, he was gay. He was first, one of the, I don't know, maybe not the first, but in an early stage with that. We heard stories that his father, who was the stable master for the Tsar, was very, what would be the correct English word for that? He was very strict, yeah. And George apparently grew up with the maids and so on, and learning how to make sketches and stuff like that. And well, it's an amazing story. They fled after the revolution via Scandinavia to UK, and his sisters ended up, they were designers, and he came to Paris with them. And he took part of the first photo shoot and became Vogue's chief photographer. And a lot of stories, all these letters keep popping up, and we are still missing a lot of material, of course. He was working with Man Ray, the most beautiful women in Paris, which is still missing, so...
Yes, if anyone knows, these people might know.
Yeah.
If you're enthusiasts of Man Ray, we're trying to find a portfolio that Man Ray made with Huene in Paris in 1926, we think it was, wasn't it? Of the most beautiful women in Paris is the name of this project. And somewhere in the world is this portfolio. So if any of you know about Man Ray, you might be able to help us, because we're desperately trying to find that, and it probably does exist somewhere, perhaps in a private collection. Yeah.
Or in a Paris flea market somewhere.
Paris flea market, can you imagine? 20 euros, there it is, yeah.
Do you have the machine, please, for me? Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds absolutely fantastic to me, because in my previous life, I used to work for a big auction house, and we sometimes had this one photograph by Hoyningen-Huene in the auction, which is the famous The Two Divers looking over the horizon. Such a beautiful photograph, and it's now, for me, it's fantastic discovery, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more and seeing more images and seeing more of your research, and yeah, it's great to bring someone like that back to life.
Maybe I could add that 5 of the big images, the platinum, palladium, the large ones that are in the exhibition, those are images that he took the images, and then most likely they had a paper copy or two, which they stamped and approved, and then it went directly for printing the magazine.
Yes.
So they never been in an edition, they never been in an exhibition, and so on. So we are trying to get those images alive and present them, because there are thousands of them that people haven't seen.
Yeah,
so
I would like to come back to this question later, because this is very interesting. How to work commercially with this and with this responsibility with this material, because Tommy has mentioned there is an edition of fantastic platinum prints made first by or started by Horst P. Horst in the 80s, and now you are doing an edition of with the same technique, so it's a kind of tradition within the work of Hoyningen-Huene, but it's posthumous. It's completely posthumous. It's very interesting thing, and I wanted to speak about that later. Also, in regard to Helmut Newton, the commercialization of the work of Helmut Newton through the art, for the art market, through a gallery. Yes. So let me just finish this round of the presentation of the archives with Heinz Hajek Halke, who is a German photographer, 20th century, born in the late 19th century, 1996, I think, and passed away in 1983. And we are at the moment showing at Chaussee 36 in Berlin a small selection of the post-war experimental work of Hajek Halke. Hajek Halke was in the 1920s and 30s part of the roaring scene in Berlin, roaring artistic scene in Berlin. He was a graphic designer, photographer, illustrator for magazines. So he comes from this world, and he was also a photographer. And his work, the early work and then the post-war work, is completely, I'd say, crazy. It's completely experimental. He was working with superpositions of negatives and working directly chemically on the negative, creating a strange work that has no I'd say no relation really in the or no link to things like surrealism or modern vision, new vision. It's really something very special. And so this is just an installation shot from here. And so this is a self-portrait. He shows himself with a classic camera, but he is so free in using the photographic equipment. Of course, it's all photographic, but it goes so far beyond the classic photograph. And so these are just two examples of his work from the 20s and 30s, and you understand that it's obviously pre-war. It's obviously 1930s and 20s, but you also understand it's experimental. It's very unique. And so these are two more examples showing his world, in fact. And then turning to the post-war period, he becomes completely abstract. So there are some elements that are visible, that you can understand, but it's mostly abstract. It's working directly on the negative and playing with the photographic technique, in fact. So this is his world. So this is really completely a different register from what we have seen before. And also, Hajek Halke has been, he is known in the history of photography, quite known, because he had exhibitions during his lifetime. He also had a very early gallery exhibition. His work was sold in a gallery, in one of the first photo galleries in Europe, Clarissa in Hanover in 1967, which is interesting. And also he had many exhibitions, book published during his lifetime, and when he passed away, his work was taken over by a friend of his, Michael Ruetz, who is a photographer and photo collector from Berlin, and he had the work, the estate. He worked with it. He published books, and he also had many initiatives for exhibitions worldwide. The Centre Pompidou has exhibited Hajek Halke's work in the early, I think in 2005 or 4, something like that. So he has been quite known to the photographic world, but there's still something to discover, and there's still things to show. And what we are going to do now with the estate is trying to put him in a more contemporary context, because the work allows this juxtaposition with contemporary experimental artistic positions. So that is just about Hajek Halke, and also this exhibition is on view until the 25th of September, so please go and have a look. Yeah, yes, so I think that is it. Yeah, that was the last slide.
One question, Simone, if you say the estate, I mean, what does it mean? Is it prints, negatives, contact sheets, the whole thing. Is it letters, everything? They're complete.
Yeah,
I mean, this is we have to speak if we speak about estates,
Exactly.
it's the completeness, or is it somewhere else, a huge body of work somewhere else, and so on.
Exactly. Very good point. Other than with you, the Hajek Halke material is spread over 2 locations, if you like. The Akademie der Künste in Berlin, the Academy of Arts in Berlin, they own the complete negative material and the archive material, like letters and notes and all of that. And everything that is print is owned by Chaussee 36. So that is the separation. And yes. So I would like to come back to this question of, maybe the market, if you like, the commercial question, because Helmut Newton, for example, is one of the most expensive photographers on the art market, with world record prices every year, new prices, high prices. Do you also deal with that?
No, we don't. And as we all know, I mean, if you go to auctions or somewhere else, platforms, whatever, we can buy a real, original, authentic one, and we can buy fakes. Unfortunately, there are a lot of fakes on the market, and if one comes to the idea to buy a real Newton, one has to go to a very serious gallery and not buying it somewhere else, I would say. So of course there are some record prices, but not for all motifs. I mean, I see sometimes in auctions, I can say, okay, this is an authentic print. I see these offers for very good prices, for $5,000 or $7,000 or $8,000, and which is actually a very good idea to invest. But on the other hand, of course, there's these kind of iconic ones. You have to pay six-figure fees, six-figure numbers, and 500,000 up to 500 or 600,000 euro or dollars. We are not a player on the market, and besides that, June decided to stop. June, the widow, and now she passed away, as you all know. She decided not to collaborate with any gallery anymore, and this is a few years ago. And so we got everything. So we have everything now in the foundation, all these, let's say the rest of all the editions and so on. Of course, there are several other motifs on the market, and there are still two great galleries at Hamilton's and Andrea Carracci and St. Moritz. They have still some pictures left, and Priskau has, I guess, some left, Kickens has some left, and so on. So there is something on the market which is really authentic, and we don't do something what you have in mind, that we have these kind of posthumous prints. But I mean, in your case, it's completely different. You bring it onto the market because there is a lack. Yeah. In our case, there's as well a kind of a lack because there is actually nothing on the market, and we have to fill it somehow. But this is a decision for the future, and this will be decided by our board. I'm just the director, and so we'll see what's happened in the future. But we are pretty sure that we don't go for posthumous prints and editions. Probably we bring something back onto the market. We'll see. At the moment, it's just that the private collector probably dies, or you don't want to keep it anymore, and then he brings it to an auction, and that's it. That's the whole thing. Yeah. And I know that an estate has to be, let's say, present as well on the market, because this is one of the columns, and we are just playing with the two other columns. It's just presenting him, publishing him, keeping him alive in this way. But I know, the market is the market, and but I don't.
I think it's. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say. I think it's also particularly with fashion photography, which Huene did a lot of other things as well. And if you see the exhibition, you'll see his travel pictures and so on. But mainly we're talking about fashion photography, is a question of the different generation of these gentlemen. Because Helmut was producing prints for the market in his own lifetime because he lived, to be old enough that there was a market that collectors were paying very high prices already, I think, for his work in his lifetime. Whereas when Huene was working, particularly in the early stages of his career, when he was still a photographer rather than his work in the movie business, there was no market. No one wanted to buy these pictures, right? No one. So Vogue kept them for 2 years, and then they destroyed them because the fashion was out of date, so they didn't keep them. If it was a portrait, they would say, okay, we keep it for 7 years because it has a kind of longer life than a fashion picture, and then that goes in the bin as well. So, there was nothing because no one thought they had any value. And that's what's so kind of sad when I think about these early fashion photographers, and it's not the case with Helmut or with David Bailey or these more recent photographers. But with those first generations, people threw those pictures out by the thousand because no one wanted them. And now, museums like the V&A, where I worked for a long time, spend a huge amount of time trying to find those early vintage prints because there are very few of them around. Whereas with Helmut, you shouldn't ever need to make any posthumous prints because he knew how to do that in his own life. He knew how to work with the market. So I'd be very surprised if you ever wanted to do that.
We'll see. We'll see what happens, but it's at the moment where we don't think about that. I mean, the only thing we do, with posthumous prints is exhibition prints.
Yes.
If we create an exhibition, which we show at our place, which we ship somewhere else, including Fotografiska some years ago. And but Susanna, you're completely right. There was no market, and Helmut had his first show in 1975. And he did his first book in 1976. And if you see some interior shots of these shows, you fall out. You fall down. I mean, it was the most beautiful prints. Nobody was buying it. It was offered for $1,500 or something. It was incredible. This would be an investment. Looking back into the 70s. But but the market started, and as well with Kicken and so on, several others. And but there was a huge explosion of the prices as Helmut entered into Gallery Simone de Paris. And it's this was probably double or triple the price, and he found these clients. He was at the peak, or actually at the peak of his career, I would say, but it actually was on the peak of his career from the 70s onwards. But this was another peak, a commercial peak in a way. As he did his huge retrospective, as he entered Taschen with the Sumo and so on. So it's, and then Simone in Zurich with a gallery, there was, like this overnight, 150, 250,000 euro for one print, and then before that was completely different, and the clients were there. I mean, he sold out some motifs, but it was very unusual by then, very unusual. And as Konstantina brought everything onto the market once, you remember this huge auction, and we were a little bit afraid, as we said, all right, oh God, he brings 50 works at one auction onto the market. This could destroy an artist in a way.
Yeah.
But it never happened.
Yes, I mean, Helmut Newton has a difficult market, I think, because you have at the same time vintage material, and then you have edited, you have limited editions from, I mean, it's a little bit complicated, I think, but I think the market is strong. And I agree that you probably don't need to do any posthumous prints because there will always be something will come up anyway. Tommy, I would like to know, how do you decide about which image, or is potentially every image an image for a posthumous edition of these platinum prints?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that we have documentation from George that his wish, he has his favorite images, and he has a wish that he, both in letters, but he also asked Horst that he wanted to produce certain books with those images and so on. So we are trying to follow that, of course, as much as we can, and if we can identify them. So that's sort of the base and the foundation of that. We believe that it's okay to do
Yes. Yes.
posthumous estate prints,
Yes.
because that was his wish.
Yeah.
We are looking to do, it was supposed to be a Hollywood movie, but I guess now it will be a Netflix series about Hoyningen-Huene and Horst.
That's interesting.
With a famous producer, so I hope that will put him back on the market. And again, a pioneer in so many ways, so it feels like we have to move his legacy forward. So, and then of course we choose images which we like or has a nice story.
Yes.
There are an awful lot of nice stories behind everything. And you can actually find prints from Hoyningen-Huene, like Catherine Hepburn, and when he took all these celebrity photos, he gave them away, and we have understood that relatives to different individuals might still have a few of them, so they keep popping up.
They do pop up
Yeah.
occasionally, and we've made a database of all the museum collections in the world that hold Huene pictures, which is from Australia to Paris, everywhere, but they tend to be in very small numbers.
Yeah.
Most museums only have 2 or 3 prints, but that information, because those early prints are so rare, and sometimes we may not have the same print in the archive, it's so valuable for us to have that kind of mapping of the world, where are these images and how can we sort of collaborate with those places when we're thinking about the posthumous prints as well, because there may be one image that we don't hold in the archive, but we would love to do a really exquisite platinum print, so we might have to go, to the museum in Canberra, Australia, to create a digital image and create something new. So it's quite a complex process, hence why there are only 10 so far of these new platinum prints. There are only 10 different images because, well, as all of you who are sort of photo enthusiasts know, platinum printing is a hugely complex and very, very expensive but exquisite process, and so we're never, I don't think, but maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but we're never going to have 1,000 different images in platinum palladium. It's about being super, super selective
Yes.
and special with these things, rather than saying, let's do millions.
Yeah, and
That's
you also
not
have these
gonna
small.
happen. We are, on the other hand, we are buying as much as vintage prints we can find.
Okay.
That's my ambition.
Yes.
So.
Okay. And also the editions are small. It's only an edition of 8 prints,
Yes.
which is small, so it's a real collector's item, actually. And yes. What are the next steps for Helmut Newton? We know that there will be a 101-year anniversary exhibition, right?
But we bring now a show to Paris, which is actually coming from Rotterdam, which is a huge part within the Thierry Mugler exhibition, and then there's a second show on Vogue photography at the Musée Gallia and in Paris, and it will be in Barcelona will be a show. Another show will be in St. Petersburg, and I have always the privilege to travel with the exhibitions and to go there to open it and so on, which is kind of cool. And the retrospective is traveling as well to Antwerp and Vienna and Milan and so on after we finish it. But then I'm preparing the exhibition, the retrospective exhibition on June Newton, Alice Springs, and so she did as well fashion photography, as you might know, yeah. And this will come up for the 100th birthday. So it's the 100th anniversary exhibition. So it will be a huge show as well, traveling and so on. So I have something to do.
Okay, you'll be busy over the next couple of years. That's good. And for you, Tommy and Susanna, will the exhibition here at Griesebach, will it travel, or will you curate something different and do a travel exhibition?
It's a bit top secret, isn't it? I don't know if we're allowed to. we have.
It's a good question.
Plans,
I think
yeah.
this was the first one out, and we are extremely happy and proud, and that we could be here in Griesebach and Berlin Photo Week. And I think we have to digest this for a while and see what the next step is. I think it's important not to go wrong. We have a responsibility to do this in a good professional way, and we're going to continue to do that. But of course, we would like to exhibit him in as many places as possible.
And it's such, I think what resonates with people is that it is a really international life that he lived, that not only did he work in Europe and then in America, but also had the most ambitious kind of travels. He wrote 5 books about his travel pictures across the whole continent of Africa, to Greece, to Mexico, to Palmyra. So it's a really international story. So, for us with exhibitions, it's about also kind of keying into these different places around the world and looking at, where are the audience there that might be fascinated in one particular area of his career. For example, to do a fantastic exhibition in Greece of his 1930s pictures, from that part of the world, perhaps. But we also have exciting museum plans that we can't really talk about yet, but very exciting plan. And as Tommy said, the Netflix plan, which is super exciting. But how about you? Because your job is very new. You were telling me it's just a few months that you've been working with the archive. So what are the plans there for you?
Yes, we are actually planning an exhibition, a big exhibition for 2023, which brings the work of Heinz Halke in a contemporary context. You have seen the pictures. There are hundreds of more of these experimental images, and it's interesting to compare, or not to compare the work, but really to put it in a context, even which could go up to NFT art. I mean, it's really something that is, for me, is so contemporary and so interesting to show together with really edgy contemporary art. That would be the next step.
So you're planning quite far ahead. That's a couple of years away.
Yeah. It's
Great.
A small team. It's a very small team, and it's a 2 years project. Yes.
Fantastic.
I would like to open up a little bit to the public. Does anyone have a question? It's now or never.
Now or never.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy, right.
Oh, there's a microphone for you there if you want. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll do this. Matthias, I have a question. Is it a good idea to speak to the foundation if you find a print and to find out if it's real or not? Or
Once again, is it a good idea?
To contact the foundation.
Yes, sure.
About prints,
Please.
if they're fake
Please.
or not.
Please come.
That would be
I
allowed.
mean, we have a very small team as well,
Yeah.
but I take the time. I take the time to check, and I'm quick in this because I know all the stamps, and they start now to fake the stamps, and they're good in that. And many years ago, they started just with signatures, within the motive and so on. This was very poor fakes. We were just looking at it, but it's they are even more tricky, and but we put it out from the market. Yeah.
And I do have one more question.
Sure.
Was there any records of these 3 photographers meeting ever?
I didn't hear it.
So,
Say it again, sorry.
is there any record of your 3 photographers meeting in real life? Did they ever meet? Did Helmut meet George, or did any of them?
Well, he died in '68, so I think, Helmut came to LA very often from, let's say, mid-'70s, and then every year from 18 onwards. I don't think so, because Hoyningen was not in Paris for such a long time. In Paris they would have met, but the funny thing is, as we did the Guy Bourdon show in our place, they were published in the same magazines, ever and ever. And they never met. This is incredible. But I mean, he was a friend of Pan, Evident, and all the others. But you know, but sometimes this happened. You know, so it's strange. And I have no idea with Hajek Halke.
Well, Hajek used in the 20s used to work with Eva. And Eva was a studio photographer in Berlin, famous in the 20s, and she is Helmut Newton's teacher, or was Helmut Newton's teacher. So there is a kind of link here. And with Hoyningen-Huene, that would be a real discovery.
Yeah. Interesting to find out. As we work through all the documents, maybe things come to light. Certainly Horst and Helmut Newton knew each other.
Of course, yes.
For sure.
But I have a question: who will be the two actors in the Netflix?
Okay. I'm Horst.
Okay, I'm okay with it.
Looking forward to that. Wow.
Okay.
We will see. But the funny and the good thing about the movie is that the research, which is the next step, it's very exciting because everything that happens during the research is probably going to guide us into new tracks and finding new information and so on. So interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was not until recently we found out that the second person in Divers were Lee Miller.
Yes, that's right. And it was Lee Miller's son who said, no, it is definitely her and Horst, because so Anthony Penrose is the son of Lee Miller. He had spoken to Horst about it when Horst was still alive, and Horst remembered that day. And Lee Miller and Horst, of course, both had amazing careers as photographers themselves, but they both were apprentices to Huene in Paris and modelled, as well as helping him with the lights and the big studio camera and learning the craft of photography. They modelled a lot for him, often together. And so it's really helpful when there are still people alive who have that connection to that generation that we can talk to. And Anthony Penrose has actually, for us, been a really great source of information because of Lee Miller's kind of close relationship to Huene and to Horst. And of course, Lee Miller also, learned from Man Ray, but she learned a very different approach to photography in the studio with Huene. So it's fascinating.
Wow. So you had a little glimpse into the photography, the history of photography also, if you like. And I think we're coming to an end. If there's no more question, I would like... Oh, there's one more question. Madame, do you have the... It's here.
Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. My question is, how can you decide if it's a fake print or if it's a real print? I mean, this is a question to all of the experts.
Experience?
Well, with Huene, there aren't really any fake prints because his prints didn't really have a value. So, in his lifetime and even after his death, they only became valuable very recently, and it's much harder to fake a print from 1925 than it is to fake a print from 1985 or 95, right? Is that fair to say?
In our case, it's if there's something wrong as well with the dates, there's something wrong with the places which is mentioned on the back. This is not his handwriting. This is not a real stamp. There are fake stamps, and we are pretty sure that we have the original stamps with the original prints we have in the house. So if we compare, we can say, no, sorry, but this is not a real one.
Is it Man Ray as well, that there are a lot of fakes? Is that correct?
Yes.
Man Ray,
yes.
Yeah.
Because the prices are so high.
Man Ray, there are some fakes, Helmut Newton, many fakes, actually, more than you'd expect. And well, thank you very much. We have had our hour, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have questions afterwards, we are here. You can ask us. And thank you for coming. And and enjoy Berlin Photo Week.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
that you love, 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 love. Only